What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys have been doing well. If you didn't see the post, today's video is about the horrific murder of 24-year-old math teacher Colleen Ritzer by one of her own students, 14-year-old Philip Chism. Now, we have to go back in time to 2013, so I want you guys to think about for a second where you were in 2013. I had just graduated high school the previous June, and I was going to community college at the time. I just started community college in August, so I was an 18-year-old community college student in Central New York. Now, at this time, when this occurred, I did not hear about this case. I did not hear about this case until more recently when I found the case and then ended up started doing more research for the case. Now, this happens October 22nd, 2013. Colleen Ritzer is teaching like she does every day. It's Buddy's Day at school. So she dresses up like one of her friends and one of her fellow math teachers. They dress in matching outfits. It's on the security cam footage, which is here on YouTube. They compiled all the security cam footage that was relevant to this crime, and they put it on YouTube. So if you're interested in it, I highly recommend watching that. It is timestamped, but there's no sound to it, just so you know. So it's timestamp of going through the day until he leaves, going from the time right before the incident to right after he leaves the campus. So if you're interested in that, that's right here on YouTube. You can look that up. So it's about 2:30 or so in the afternoon, and they have like this after school period that a lot of classes and schools do, that where if students need extra help, maybe they're struggling studying for an upcoming test and they need help on some homework, whatever they need. That's why they have this little period after their last class so they can go get some extra help. Now, Philip Chism was in her last math class of the day, and he was also in this last period. And there was one other student who was in this extra period after school, but she wasn't in her last class. This student, she just wanted to come say hi to her favorite teacher, because a little bit about Colleen before we go any forward here. She was loved by everyone she knew. From the time she was little, she knew that she wanted to be a teacher. She knew that she wanted to help people. She knew that was the road she went down. And everyone that she knew loved her. I mean, the staff at the school loved her. The students loved her. She was reportedly the kind of teacher rather, that made students love the subject that she taught if they hadn't loved it before, because there was a number of students that came forward that said, hey, I didn't even like math until I had her, and she made math so fun because she loved math so much and she loved teaching so much and loved trying to help us, that I then enjoyed math or got better at math because of what she was doing for us and because of what she was doing as a teacher. Now, she was in her second year of teaching when she is very unfortunately murdered here. So it's about 2:54 in the afternoon when she heads to the restroom before getting set to leave for the day, because she lived at home with her parents a couple miles away from the school. She had just told Philip and the other student, hey, I'm essentially we're wrapping it up for the day, I'll see you guys tomorrow, sort of thing. So before she leaves, she goes to goes to the bathroom, because that's what most people did before they leave the school for the day, before you gotta either get in the bus or get in your car. I know I did that every day, just a normal thing. She was a creature of habit, so she probably used that bathroom every day. So then you see Philip Chism poke his head out. He looks left, looks right, pops back in for a second, and then he exits. He's wearing a blue hoodie and jeans, and obviously he's wearing shoes at this point, and he has his blue hoodie up. Now he walks towards the direction Colleen was walking, and then he walks towards the bathroom. Then you can see on the security cam footage, he pulls something out of his pocket and shakes it out. That is a pair of gloves. He has a pair of gloves on him, and he also has a box cutter on him, but we don't see the box cutter on the security cam footage of the school. We just see him pull out the box cutter, not the box cutter, we see him pull out the gloves, and put the gloves on. Now, he pauses before he goes into the bathroom just to make sure that she is indeed alone in that bathroom, because this is a premeditated attack by him. He brought the box cutter. You'll later find out in just a minute, he brought multiple changes of clothes. He premeditated this attack, but he didn't premeditate any further than that, as you're going to find out. He didn't premeditate how to get away with it, because if he did that, he probably wouldn't have attacked her on school. His forethought didn't go any further than I want to attack and harm this teacher for no reason. Now, but before we go any further, let me tell you a little bit about Philip Chism, because we have to talk about the murderer, unfortunately, although we have to remember that these cases are about the victims. So Philip Chism was a 14-year-old student. He was a freshman, and Colleen was actually on the freshman team that was in charge of looking after that year's freshman class. You know, new teacher probably helped out that she was also new, help make connections with students. No, he had recently moved from Tennessee with his mother, because his parents had gone through what they kind of described as a pretty contentious divorce, you know what I mean? You know, plenty of students' parents and plenty of parents, unfortunately, get divorced. Not every marriage lasts. So his parents had gotten divorced. And he moved up to Tennessee, from Tennessee to Danvers, Massachusetts, with his mother. And they were living together. I believe they were living with their grandmother. I could be wrong about that, but I believe they were living together in Danvers. And from all reports up until this point, he was a normal person. He may have been a little bit introverted because, you know, parents were going through a pretty contentious divorce, and that can kind of make you a little bit introverted and withdrawn. But, you know, everyone in Tennessee said, yeah, he was a normal kid. You know, they didn't see this coming. Like you hear time after time, we didn't see the violence that was to come. And, you know, this is a 14-year-old. You don't think that a 14-year-old is going to brutally assault and murder his math teacher. So fast forward back to, he goes into the bathroom with his gloves on. He's in that bathroom for about 11 minutes. And then 11 minutes later, like 3:11, 3:12 or so, a little after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, another student walks into the bathroom. They later testified that she was trying to like get reception on her cell phone so she can call her dad to come pick her up from school. You know, I've never been in the bathroom that had pretty good reception, but maybe that bathroom did. But she quickly turns around because there's like a little half wall in the bathroom, and she saw what she described as a person with darker skin tone. She saw their behind. So she's like, oh, I probably walked in on someone changing. I'm a bit embarrassed. You know, let me leave. And he obviously hears this door open and close and then open and close again when she leaves. So Philip Chism also immediately leaves the bathroom. And he looks at her. We can see him turn his head towards the direction that this other student walked. Now, thankfully for everybody involved, he also didn't follow her. He goes outside to like the student parking lot area, and this is also caught on security cam footage, and he like crouches in a bush because he had Colleen's pants, he had most likely her underwear as well in that bundle, and he had like a white little ball of what was probably the gloves in the middle of that bundle of clothing. And then when he comes back into the school 2 minutes later, he's not wearing his hoodie anymore. He's got blood on his hands. He's got some blood on his pants. He comes back into the school. He goes into the classroom, grabs his stuff, grabs Colleen's stuff, and grabs the red jacket he was initially wearing, because that blue hoodie that he had just been wearing when he was in the bathroom, brutally assaulting his teacher, brutally murdering his teacher, he didn't wear that to class. He was wearing like a red zip up that like didn't have a hood on it, and that's like draped over his head. And he walked towards the stairs, and he puts like a bunch of this stuff in the in like a little trash area. So he starts, after he does that, he walks back up the stairs. He starts walking back toward the bathroom. Now at this point, he's about to go into the bathroom when he sees one of his soccer teammates coming up those same set of stairs that are right before the bathroom. You'll see this in the security cam footage. And he turns around because obviously, from his point of view, he doesn't want this kid to see him entering the women's restroom. So he turns around, makes a U-turn, starts running back down the hallway. And the kid's like, hey, what's going on? Why don't we practice before soccer? Because Philip was on the soccer team and he was reportedly a very good soccer player. And they're like, hey, he's like, yeah, I'll be there. No, they said initially he asked his other kid for help, But then he's like, no, never mind. I'll be there. The kid tried to kick the soccer ball to him, tried to engage with him. He probably thought it was like a little weird interaction, but, probably didn't think much of it at the time because you don't think your 14-year-old has just done what he just did in the bathroom, you know what I mean? So this kid just goes about his day, probably forgets about the interaction until he later finds out what happened. So Philip goes back downstairs, probably to where he dumped the other stuff that he had just taken out of the classroom, and he grabs a recycle bin. So what he does with the recycle bin is he brings it into like an elevator, because this is like a multi-floored building. He goes back into the bathroom, where he's in the bathroom for another 6 minutes. Now, when he comes out of the bathroom, he's very clearly struggling with the weight of this thing, because he's obviously not used to dragging something that heavy, because her body is now in this recycle bin that has these wheels on it. So he starts dragging this thing outside, and he starts heading towards the woods. Now, we know the first way he tried to get into the woods didn't work, because there was a student that had been sitting out of track practice with an injury who saw Philip trying to get into the woods that way. Now, it was a pretty steep area, they said, so he really couldn't get into the woods that way. So we had to go back around the school, but took him about 5 or so minutes. And then he's in the woods alone with her once he finally gets into the woods for about another 25, 30 minutes. So by this point, he's interacted or walked past like 3 people, because he interacted, the girl walked into the bathroom, although he didn't interact with her. He interacted with his friend on the soccer team. There was a teacher in the hallway that looked like she was just leaving for the day that he ran past in the hallway that didn't bother with him. At one point, he's wearing like a ski mask, and then he takes it off. He's obviously hasn't planned this far ahead. He obviously pre-planned the murder, but he obviously didn't do any more planning than that, because he's 14. So after he comes back from the woods, right, he's covered in blood. His pants are covered. His hand is covered in blood, even more so than it was when he first left the bathroom. I mean, it is very clear that something just happened. If you didn't know what happened, he's covered. And he also doesn't have shoes on. And at this point, he doesn't run into anybody. The entire time he has no shoes on, he somehow interacts with nobody. Now, that most likely happens because he only interacted with a few people, because this was quite a good sized school, and he was in the academic wing. And at this point, a lot of the people that were still at school were either, at the athletic fields, or they were in other parts of the school. So that's why most likely he didn't interact with more people that would have been there earlier in the day, because they were either gone or they were in other parts of the building just doing other things. So he's got no shoes on. So he comes back upstairs, and then he goes to his locker and grabs another change of clothes. It's like a drawstring athletic bag, nylon bag. And he goes into the bathroom and he changes into his soccer clothes, and he still has no shoes on at this point. Now, he leaves the school again and goes back into the woods for another like 10, 12 minutes or so. And then when he comes back out of the woods, he's got shoes on. And then he interacts with another kid who was actually homeschooled that he had known through church. They made plans to go to youth group, because they had attended youth group together, and that's how he knew this kid and his dad. But it was just another like normal interaction that he had, that those people said, yeah, at the time, I didn't really see anything out of the ordinary about it. It was just another normal interaction. They didn't sense that anything was off about him. And then he comes back into the school. He meanders around the school for a while, because he had been in the woods for 25 minutes, and he came back out. Then he interacted with this kid, came back in. Altogether, he was in the woods for more than half an hour in between the two time, and probably close to an hour total. I could be a little bit off on that. Now, he meanders around the school. He doesn't just leave, like I keep saying. He obviously very clearly doesn't have a plan on what to do and, where to go, and I got to do this, I got to do that to be able to not get caught, because he obviously didn't think that far ahead. The only thing that he thought about was, I'm going to get her, I'm going to get her, essentially, probably. So then he eventually leaves the school. He doesn't leave the school till after like 4:30 or so. So he's on campus from the time that he initially attacks her till 4:30 or so, for about an hour, hour and a half, give or take a few minutes here and there. So we know that he stole her credit card. He stole her wallet because he uses her wallet to go see a movie. He uses her credit card to buy Wendy's. He also shoplifts a knife from BJ's. So at this point, he's missing. Obviously, she's an adult. They don't really think much of that yet. Her parents were obviously concerned, but initially they're like, maybe she had plans that she forgot to tell us about, but it's really strange because her car's here and all of her stuff's not here. But initially they just tried to be like, all right, she's probably fine. We're probably, they're probably thinking they're overreacting. She's an adult. She probably just has plans she forgot to tell us about. But fast forward to about like a little after 6:30 that night, Philip's mother calls the Danvers Police Department to report him missing. She's like, hey, my son didn't go to soccer practice. He didn't come home after school, after practice. I'm obviously worried, as any parent would be in this situation. Their kid's missing, their kid didn't come home. They're going to call the police and report him missing. So a couple of hours later, at about 9 o'clock, no one's seen him yet. No one's heard from him. The police department, not the police department, the principal basically issues a school-wide email saying, hey, there's a missing 14-year-old that goes to our school. His name's Philip Chism. That whole, hey, we got a missing kid. Everyone look out for him, essentially. I don't know exactly what was written in the email. And then that teacher that we mentioned earlier that was friends with Colleen, she calls the principal and says, hey, principal, she's also missing. Her parents are worried sick now. It's almost 10 o'clock at night. No one's heard from her. She hasn't called. She hasn't texted anybody. No one's heard from her. We're concerned. And then obviously they go into even more of a panic mode, because not only now do they have a teacher missing, they have a student missing, they also have a teacher missing. And then they also quickly figured out, which wouldn't have been hard to figure out, that Philip Chism was in her last class of the day. So they're like, what are the odds that these two disappearances from the same school, when they had the last class of the day together, aren't connected? But at this point, no one suspected Philip of anything because they haven't found her yet. They don't find her until after he's located. So fast forward to about after 10 o'clock at night, her parents call the police to report her missing. It's about 10:20, 10:30 at night. They're like, we're still worried about our daughter. She hasn't called, she hasn't texted anybody. No one's seen her since the end of the school day. They even went to the school and looked for her, like I said. They're all worried sick about her. But they can't find her, they can't find Philip. No one knows where these two are. Now, fast forward again a couple hours after midnight into the next day. So it's after midnight into the next day, into the next morning. Philip is eventually found. He is basically walking the wrong way down a roadway that they basically said was kind of a dangerous roadway. It wasn't real lit. He's walking in the opposite flow of traffic. So traffic's going one way, he's walking the other way. Now, the first officer that stopped him didn't recognize him at first, because while he knew Philip Chism was missing, because his daughter went to Danvers, although this is in Topsfield, because he eventually makes his way out of Danvers and is in neighboring Topsfield. The cop didn't think it was Philip at first because he said that this guy looked like he was in his late teens, early 20s. And he's still in his soccer clothes at night in the Northeast state. I don't know if you guys have ever spent any time in the Northeast at night in the fall. It gets cold. It was like 40 or something degrees that night in Danvers. And he's like, this is strange. But he starts the interaction. Hey, where are you coming from? Oh, I'm coming from Tennessee. Where are you going? I'm going nowhere. But throughout this entire interaction, Philip's not looking at the cop. If you guys are the police officer, Philip's off looking this way. He's going, not looking at him, giving short answers, looking off into the distance, they essentially said. And then they do a pat frisk because it's dark out. They think they don't know what's going on at this point. And so they find in one of his shorts pockets, They find both of her licenses. They find her credit card information. They find all of the stuff that was in her wallet, because it's not in her wallet. It's just kind of wrapped up in like a rubber band or something in his pocket. And then in the other pocket, he had like a rock for some reason. But so after that, they're like, hey, where did you get this this stuff? Because they don't know Colleen is missing yet, because that information hasn't disseminated outside of Danvers and to, you know, the neighboring towns and communities. He goes, oh, I got it at a Stop and Shop. And they're like, what Stop and Shop? He goes, I don't know. So they're like, this is really strange. He's telling us he's got survival gear in the backpack. He's got these credit cards and all this information that obviously doesn't belong to him. So what's going on, essentially? So they bring him over to the cruisers. They eventually identify him as Philip Chism. And then when the officer realizes it, he's like, oh great, we found the missing kid. We can return him home to his parents. It'll be a good day. Maybe he just took the credit cards from somewhere. They haven't quite figured that out yet. They transport him back to the Topfield Police Department, because, you know, they're Topfield cops. That's where they're going to bring him. And then they start going through his stuff, and, you know, they find a bloody box cutter. They find her pants and her underwear. They're like, hey, who does this stuff belong to? Whose blood is this? And he goes, it's the girl's blood. And then they're like, where is she? And then he goes, she's buried in the woods. And then the other officer is saying, if we get to her, can we help her? And he says no. And they're like, this just got a lot worse. So they call Danvers. They explain to him what's happening. One of the cops, while the other cop's still talking to him, they're like, don't talk to him anymore. They initially asked these two cops to come bring him down to them, but they're like, hey, we're a really small department. We just can't send an officer out to bring this kid back to you. You guys got to come to us. It's just a safety issue for Topsfield. It's only one cop here. So it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning by the time he gets back to Danvers. And he's not placed in cuffs until a state police officer gets to where he's being held in Topsfield and says, cuff him and put his hands behind his back. So it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning by the time he gets back, and she still hasn't been found yet. Now, I don't know much about what happened or what he may have said or not said after he got back to Danvers, but her body's found at about 3 a.m. So it's like 2 or so hours later after they eventually get him back to Danvers. Now, what they find in the woods is incredibly horrific. She's obviously not wearing anything on her lower half because he stole that from her. Her shirt's pulled up and her bra is pulled down, exposing her chest, because he again assaulted her in the woods. And they also found a 3-foot-long stick that was still there that he had also assaulted with, that was still where he left it. There was a note saying, I hate you all. And then they also found his his school ID and identifications in the immediate area as well. And they're like obviously freaking out at this point, because they're like, this kid killed her. He obviously had to have killed her, had to have been involved, because his ID wouldn't be here. You know, this is probably his handwriting. I don't know if they did a handwriting analysis, but they're like, obviously shit. So fast forward, he gets arrested, and let's fast forward to the trial. Now, the only defense that the defense had, because although he initially pleaded not guilty, they didn't even, by the time it got to a jury trial, didn't even try to deny that he did it. The only defense that they tried to have is not guilty by reason of insanity, because they tried to go with like an early onset schizophrenia defense. Now, like I said before, I try not to blame defense attorneys, especially when defense attorneys don't have much to work with, because they're just trying to do their job. Because as you guys know, in America, every defendant has the right to a defense. And this lady is just trying to do her job, trying to defend this kid. But she had nothing to work with. And this prosecution, this female prosecutor, was incredible. Because I watched her opening statement. I didn't watch the full trial. I watched the defense's opening statement. I watched them cross-examine and examine the 2 police officers that stopped him, this defense team did not have a chance at all. So the only charge that they eventually got dropped, they didn't get convicted of, was the assault in the woods, because they couldn't prove that she was still alive in the woods, although most likely they believe she was, due to the severity of her injuries, the strangling combined with the stab wounds. They couldn't exactly tell, did she die in the bathroom, did she die on the way to the woods, did she die in the woods? And in Massachusetts at the time, the victim of an assault charge like that, an SA charge, had to be alive to be able to press charges, because they didn't have any laws against abuse of corpse at the time. Now, hopefully those all have changed. They may not have, I don't know. Now, he eventually gets convicted on all charges, minus the SA in the woods. Because he was charged as an adult because he was 14, but the law allowed them to charge him as an adult for the murder. He is sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years for the murder. And then he is sentenced to 40 years and a day for the robbery and the SA on her in the bathroom. Now, you might think this is the end. He goes to prison, case closed. Another monster is put behind bars. Her family can heal, her family can move on. But that's not the end of this story for Philip Chism, because while he is on trial and he's being held in like this youth detention center, essentially, he attacks a youth services worker and almost kills her. So now, after this trial, they have to then, put him on trial for this, because he almost killed this lady. And she was like, I've had nightmares about it ever since. And it was only a couple months ago that he ended up pleading guilty to the charge, and he got sentenced to like 17 to 20 years, I believe it was, in prison. Why it took them 10 years, I don't know. Maybe they didn't think it was as big of a deal because they knew he was already going to be in prison for a minimum of 40 years if he ever gets out. Because he's not guaranteed parole on the murder charge. And even if he gets parole, first shot 25 years later, he's not getting out, because he's still got to serve a minimum of 40 years on the other 2 charges. But he got 20 years on the other charge, but that would run out by the time the 40 runs out, But he'd be in his 50s if he gets out as early as he can get out. And that's the case of Colleen Ritzer's tragic murder. Now, her legacy has lived on. There was the Colleen Ritzer Foundation, which I will link in the comments. It's tragic that they had to wait until after their daughter died, to really see the impact and the legacy that she had on that local community. Because although she was a new teacher, she was really young. She had very obviously touched so many people. And the outpouring to her family and to the community afterwards. I mean, this grants scholarships to kids who want to become teachers. I think it was a 5K every year. They do fundraising. Their daughter has a legacy, but unfortunately, she's not here to see the legacy that she has, that is bearing her name. And Philip Chism is exactly where he needs to be. I want to make that clear. He deserves to be in prison. And honestly, I'm going to say this, I hope he never gets out, because I know I've probably said this before on this channel, but for the longest time, I was against giving minors really rough sentences, really long sentences for even the most horrific crimes. But it was just more in the past year or two that, between looking at cases like this and talking to friends and family, that I've really changed my mind on the idea of minors getting life and death penalties. Because honestly, I think this kid should have been executed for this crime. But obviously, they couldn't have, they didn't have that option. Because honestly, I think this judge probably would have given this kid a death penalty if they had the opportunity to. But I could be wrong. But that's the case of Colleen Ritzer and Philip Chism. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this case. It's, like I said, incredibly tragic. If you have any other cases, any other spooky content, whether it's not spooky or crime related in general, I like talking about everything. I obviously like talking and running my mouth. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, email this to your grandma and your grandma's grandma, and get them all at the nursing home to watch it or whatever. But until next time, guys, stay safe and have fun.